All right, Tiffany, do you hear me?
I do.
All right, good. We are in. Welcome back. Uh, I have here with me my adoptive sister, Tiffanie Hayward. She is, she's had quite a struggle with what's been going on in Israel and Palestine recently. Now, Tiffany, you are Jewish, raised Jewish.
That is
Um,
correct. My mother is Ukrainian and Polish Jewish. For Jewish people out there, you know that um, if your mother's Jewish, you are Jewish. But yes, I was also raised Jewish.
hmm and let's see, going through. Uh, well, you wanted to go into your background. You're raised Jewish. You have your Juris Doctorate. Um, just what did you want to go into the background in regards to this topic?
Well, really, I just wanted to explain why I have such a vested interest in this topic.
hmm
Um, and that is just that um, while it may surprise people, although we've already said it, I am Jewish. My family came over here combined during the Bolshevik Revolution and others during World War I and others during World War II. So I am Jewish. Um, I was raised Jewish. My grandmother was very conservative Jewish, um, and her family even Orthodox. So I do have more than just a personal opinion.
Yep, and I remember you telling me stories about how you grew up and you're speaking with Holocaust survivors constantly, getting their feedback on all sorts of different events, warnings about what can happen, and all that.
I currently have one friend who is a Holocaust survivor. And yes, I think that people would have a very different take on most events um, if they listened to what they had to say.
Yeah, they survived the Holocaust, but not many survive old age. They're dying off, unfortunately. Um, okay, and so I think we covered your second thing you wanted to cover, the reasoning why you wanted to go into this.
Yeah, essentially, just people
Oh,
look at me and they don't naturally see somebody who would have a reason to have an opinion in this matter as in the Jewish community. You know, the Jewish community is fairly insular, right? We are very cautious, careful people. We're very aware of the discrimination that we face around the world. Um, we're very aware that anti-Semitism is a constant problem. It's not something that rears its head. It's something that rears its head to those who are not Jewish. But if you are Jewish, you know it is a constant problem that you face. Jewish shuls being attacked or threatened is not something that is new to any Jewish person. It may happen more frequently um, during different crises and world events, but it happens all the time. So Jewish people tend to be very insular, and we tend to be very uh, skeptical of people having strong opinions over things that we feel impact us and are about us. Um, so I say all that to say that what I usually have to say whenever I'm engaging with people who don't know me and also happen to be Jewish, that yes, I am Jewish. So yes, I come from a similar place as other Jews speaking on this issue.
okay, and so I think it's probably a good idea to set the stage here for what's been going on. And I am going to throw out a few dates, but they're going to be very generic dates. Back, I think it was June of 1967. That's when the Six Day War started. And as far as of yet, it's never ended. And we see many different iterations. This is why Israel's accused of war crimes when they wouldn't, this was all internal to Israel. It wouldn't be considered a war crime. Still war crimes against humanity, but not war crimes. We had the Intifada in the late 80s. Then Israel claims at least that they had pushed Hamas to become a radical sect, essentially trying to create the enemy they wanted to create, which I don't. Some people say they only said that to try to discredit Hamas, but it seems they're more telling on themselves. They created the monster that they're trying to justify all their actions through. Then recently, October 7th is when Hamas started with an act that can only be called genocide. They went in and they murdered hundreds of people was it a music concert? Yeah.
It was at a music concert at people's homes, on kibbutz. Yes.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that we have to condemn that. But I believe you were telling me before that the Israeli people are pretty sure, by and large, that Netanyahu let that happen for strategic purposes.
What I would say is that there's definitely a large portion of people who believe that to be true. There's also a large portion of people who feel that he just was so focused on becoming a dictator and getting rid of their judiciary that he thought he had control over a situation he did not have control over. But because I don't want to go into a long line of history, and I don't want to talk too much about specific dates, but just to give some context for anybody who does, just to answer the arguments that I know people would give me. Jewish ties to this land go all the way back to the Canaanites. That said, the people who lived there during that time were not European. And the vast majority of Zionistic Jews are European, who have absolutely no historical tie to that land at all. None. Okay? You share the same religion. You are not indigenous to the land. Those are two different things. Many Native Americans here have become Christians. That has not changed their indigenous status. You do not become indigenous because you are of a certain religion. You are indigenous if you have a genetic historical tie to the land, which European Jews do not. So I say all that just to say that my wishing to avoid ancient biblical history is not because it detracts from my argument. The deeper into history you go, the more it favors the Palestinians. So it's not that I shy away from that argument. It's that I'm really tired of the argument being, during ancient times, this belonged to us. So now we have the right to do this. And it's an argument that is exhausting and pointless. And if we're being honest, not even real, because most Zionists are European Jews, and that's not your people. I'm sorry, you're not the same. So, I just prefer to stay away from that historical context. But I do want to make sure that it is provided that that is where the Jewish belief to this land comes from. Now, am I saying that Israel is not a holy land for Jews. Of course not. It's a holy land for Jews. It's a holy land for Muslims. It's a holy land for Christians. It's a holy land for a lot of people. But yeah, so I guess when I was talking about history, that's what I meant, as I just didn't want to go too far backwards. I really want to focus more on what's happening right now.
Yeah, though I do want to go back for a moment because I just had a thought. You're mentioning, no, there's Bowie and Penn. But you have, you were mentioning that it has to do with genetic ties, and the Ashkenazi Jews from Europe didn't have that genetic tie there. It does seem to me that it's highly likely that a lot of Palestinians probably have Jewish ancestors who did come from that.
Absolutely.
They converted from Judaism to Islam or Christianity.
Absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm. The Palestinians who lived there were Jews. Once, originally people who lived there were pagans. I think they worshipped Baal. Like how far back do you want to go is the real question. But yes, there are still many Arab Jews. And there's still, and the thing about Palestinians is they are not all Islamic. It's a brush that people like to paint them with, but they're not. They're actually a fairly diverse people. There are Christian Palestinians, there are Muslim Palestinians, there are Jewish Palestinians. They're a diverse group. One of the things people don't really, I guess it seems to me like people don't really realize it, but Bethlehem is in the West Bank. And the people who live there are Arab Christians. They're Catholic. And right now they have a whole manger scene going on called Christ Amongst the Rubble, because if he were born today, that's what he would be born. We would be born amongst, if not just flat out gunned down. So yeah, there are diverse people. They're not just one thing.
Oh yeah, and I do remember reading about when the Zionist movement first started, that the Palestinian population welcomed the Jewish settlers with open arms, mainly because they brought in tons and tons of European money with them. It was good economically for them to come. A lot of them were working on the Jewish settlements, helping them along. And a lot of the real tension, there was no tension until there was a nationalist call that only Jews should be working on those settlements to show the Jewish national spirit and blah, blah, blah. It was nationalism that brought any enmity into the situation. Then it went back and forth. We won't go into any specifics of that. I know I'm not well versed on what happened after that initial era until probably 48. But
I think something really important in what you said is it's the nationalist view. It's not our Jewishness that caused the problems. It's not being Jewish that it makes you hateful or look down upon Palestinians or Muslims. That it is the nationalist view that they take that this must belong to me. Because unfortunately, right now, I guess we're seeing some amount of pushback, but it really is being painted as if Jewish people, as a group in general, believe that this war is the right thing to happen and is acceptable, and that genocide is fine, if that's what you need to preserve the Jewish state. But that is not a Jewish belief at all. It is very antithetical to what we believe.
And I remember you telling me there's a big difference between support for that amongst American Jews and Israeli Jews.
From what, and it also depends if you're talking about the right wing Jews in Israel, the ones who live in the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, and are settlers. They're absolutely huge proponents of this. But there is a very large amount of Jewish people who are actively protesting this, actively angry with their government that the focus has not been releasing hostages, but has been on so-called getting rid of Hamas, which is something that I know a lot of people I know who live there question, and I know that I question. If you look back throughout history, you'll see every time there's a war between the two, Israel takes a little bit more land and, kind of ethnically cleanses the Palestinians into a smaller and smaller and smaller space. And now here we have clearly the worst war between these two groups. And by their own admission, the point very much appears to be to have no Palestinians left in the area. Earlier on in this conflict, a letter was released that was not supposed to be from the Israeli government. And the letter talked about how if, for whatever remaining Palestinians there were, in other words, however many people survived, which if, I'm reading a bit between the lines here, but if you can kind of pull from that what they're saying is they don't expect that many to live, but that they wanted them pushed into Egypt. Okay. Now, we could call that ethnic cleansing, but really what it is genocide, because genocide is not just literal death of a people, it's also the death of a culture, the death of a language. All of these things are genocide. And I think that there's a view amongst a lot of people that because Palestinians, the majority are Muslim, they could just live in Jordan. They could just live in Egypt. They could just live anywhere and be safe. But the thing is that Palestinians have their own culture. They have their own foods. They have their own ways of celebrating. They have their own ways of dress. They have their own beliefs. They have their own culture. They are their own people. Yeah, they're not Egyptian, they're not Jordanian. So when you're talking about that, what you're talking about is genocide, which appears to be the point of this, that at this point they want to occupy all of Gaza and get rid of Palestinians. And when that document was leaked, Netanyahu's response was, this is not a plan, this was just one option. I mean, I'm not making that up. That's essentially what he said, is this is just one option.
Yeah, and a couple things are number one is that ethnic cleansing is recognized as a form of genocide specifically. Second thing is I'm thinking as far as framing, it seems similar, the idea that you can tell the Palestinians they can live in all these other countries instead. It'd be similar to tell American Jews who have their own, different culture than Israeli Jews, hey, you don't have to live in America. We could do whatever we want to over here. You can go live in Israel. And I'm sure Netanyahu would love that. He'd love the hell out of that. But it seems to be this, the parallel there. It is the oppression of a people where they're treated as not equal. The big central point of nationalism is exclusionism. We are the in-group, the nation. Everyone else is the out-group, and they don't belong here. They're secondary, which comes about that. And I also remember reading about how the families of the hostages that were taken by Hamas really got very, very angry and made big news in Israel because they were super upset with Netanyahu that he did not value their lives. Nope. Here's our loved ones. You don't care about Jews. You just care about killing the Palestinians.
Yes, this is 100% accurate. They talk about Jewish safety, but the reality is Jews around the world are less safe every day that this war continues. We see that with threats coming to Jewish temples and synagogues and shuls from in and out of the country. We are less safe every day that this continues, not more safe. This gives people more of a motivation to commit hate against Jews. We see things like Holocaust 2.0 spray painted on campuses. They can't get rid of it. Why? Because we're seen as somebody who is supporting the genocide of an entire group of people. So yes, you cannot possibly say that, for a while, maybe Israel had a cover of an argument that they cared about the hostages. And I say Israel not to mean the Israelis, citizens, but their Netanyahu, the right-wing government. Maybe they had a cover to begin with that, when they were just bombing like crazy, but they just killed 3 of their own hostages. They were shirtless, wearing white flags, speaking Hebrew, and they shot them to death because they felt in danger. Now, let's just take that on its face as being true, that they felt they were in danger. They felt a half-clothed, weaponless Palestinian man, 3, were so dangerous that they needed to shoot them and kill them because they were walking with white flags, the international symbol of help, hey, peace, not me.
That's
okay?
A serious lack of discipline.
If that means if we're going to accept that as true, that they thought them as dangerous, if we're going to accept that to be the truth, how brainwashed do you have to be to have such a deep level of fear that a half-naked man with no weapon, with his hands in the air, carrying a white flag, speaking your own language, frightens you? That just tells you about the attitude, if that is accurate, and that's why they did what they did. It just tells you about the attitude that they have created within their own populace towards Palestinians. That 3 half-naked men with no weapons, and you have a bucket load of guns and an entire military surrounding them, frighten you that much.
Yep, absolute hate. And it strikes me, one of the big problems with nationalism is this whole idea of outgroup. If you declare somebody part of your outgroup, you're also telling them that they should consider you part of their outgroup. And we act very differently between people, whether we consider them part of our in-group or our out-group. So if you say you are so different, you're not part of us, you're also encouraging them to think that way about you. And they think that way about you, they are much more likely to perpetuate violence against you. You are creating enemies by telling them you are not us. That's one of the great things when you talk about an international community. We do have a sense, even if it's not with all the right people, we have a sense of community with these Western nations that we go look at people from Britain, we look at people from France, and we generally think they are us. Even though they're not Americans, we have this sense of in-group with them. But when you're creating that sense of, no, you are our out-group, you're destroying any sense where they are thinking of you as part of us. And it gets even worse when you become when it becomes endangered or
well, yes, creating that separation and making sure that people don't see each other as people is a way to divide and rule, which has been the overall method of the powers that be throughout all of human history. Divide and rule. But before I go too far off on a tangent on divide and rule, because that can take us everywhere, or even in-group, out-group, I want to talk about ultimately what my position is on this current war and why.
Okay.
I am for an immediate ceasefire. I am for the removal of all troops, military personnel from Gaza. I am for the end of the blockade. I am for the removal of all settlers in the West Bank. And I believe the level of restitution owed to rebuild Gaza should be upon Israel for being the ones to destroy it. I want to be clear, because this is a constant refrain. Do I condemn the acts of October 7th? Of course I do. And it's gaslighting to pretend that somebody saying they don't want Palestinians bombed doesn't condemn October 7th. The whole point is we don't want people to die. We don't want innocent people harmed. Be that harm death, rape, kidnapping, whatever it is, innocent people are innocent people. They're innocent regardless to what their governments do. The vast majority of Israelis were born there, and they have no choice about where they're born. Okay, they have no more choice about where they're born than you or I do. They were born there. For those that are born there, where are they going back to? Where? Where are they going to go? Float out on the sea? They're people. They're innocent people. They don't deserve to be slaughtered. They don't deserve to be raped. What happened on October 7th was wrong and horrific, brutal and gruesome, and difficult to imagine how any human being could carry out such an act against people that are innocent. Really, much of what happened, it's hard to believe how you could carry that act out against anybody, even if they are guilty, to do such horrible things. And it is hard to understand how you can defend crushing children in their own beds, blowing up hospitals, refugee camps, and other places where there are innocent people based on what happened on October 7th. That, even if that was the start, even if all the history didn't exist, even if none of that historical context happened, how many people have to die before it's enough? These are just innocent people living their lives in already difficult circumstances. Most people don't realize, but Israel controls everything that comes in and out of Gaza. Okay, they control the goods that are sold, that get sold on their market. They control who goes to college. The kids have to apply. They control their access to the sea in terms of fishing. There was one of the moments that I found most appalling in all of this, with all the things there are to be appalled by, was the deputy mayor of Jerusalem made a comment when asked about, the United States does not want you to occupy Gaza. And she said, we left Gaza and we gave them this beautiful strip of land, beautiful beaches, access to the sea, et cetera, et cetera. They could have created Dubai. They could have created Singapore. Is it our fault they can't self-govern? Now, I'm paraphrasing, but only slightly. I believe that, is it our fault they can't self-govern is me paraphrasing. The rest of it was pretty much word for word. They live behind a blockade. Singapore is along a major trade route and not under a blockade. Dubai, oil, also not under a blockade. And I have to wonder, was she speaking to Americans thinking that most Americans are too ignorant to know how ridiculous of a statement that is? Or is she herself that ignorant and that brainwashed that she actually believes that was something that was within Palestinian control? They have limited access to where they can access the sea for fishing. That's a very controlled, regulated process, and it's regulated by the Israelis. Everything there is controlled. They have no control over anything. in their own lives on a day-to-day basis, even in times when it's not an active war zone. Immediately when this happened, Israel cut off their access to power, knowing that meant cutting off their access to water.
Well, they've cut off water long before that.
We have long since said that cutting off access to water is a war crime. According to the international community, you cannot take away water. And yet here we have these things happening and there's really no accountability at all. And it's this constant pretense that, well, Hamas did what it did, so now here we are. So what is the end goal then? What is the end goal? You've killed, what is the number now? 25,000?
I don't know the number. I've heard 20,000 before, but that was been,
Yes.
week ago.
It was like 20,000 was weeks ago. I think they're up to like 25,000 people that are dead. I understand that their claim is some of them are combatants, but the vast majority of them are civilians, and the vast majority of them are children.
At least one of them has
of
been
the population is under the age of 18. Okay, 50% of the population are children. Another argument for this war is that, well, the Palestinians, they voted in Hamas. Maybe 15% of the people who voted in Hamas are alive today.
Yep. I want to point out at least one of them has been identified as an American citizen, because Netanyahu refused to let the American citizens flee before he started the bombing.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted to point out, because this is something you've also gone into with me before, the fact that the Palestinian people, majority there, never had a chance to vote.
No.
They're not supporters of Hamas. When Hamas won, they ran as moderates, and they only got a slight plurality of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like they overwhelmingly won the election.
Mm-mm. And the vast majority of those people are dead. Maybe 15% of the people who voted for them are still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe 15%. And the reason I bring all this up, because if I was sitting in a room full of depending on my crowd, if I was having a conversation, they would talk about how it's such an illegitimate argument to make anyway. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But my point here is I kind of want to dispel every myth about this war, that if that they're the ones who voted in Hamas. 15% of the people, maybe, okay? The majority of the people who voted in Hamas are dead, okay? The majority of the people in Gaza have never had a chance to vote in their lives. And the majority, again, over 50%, are just children. These are just kids.
And many current Israeli politicians have framed all Palestinians as being animals, subhuman, demons even.
We've heard that language, yeah.
Yeah,
which is the language of genocide.
That babies are, just terrorists in waiting, and et cetera, et cetera.
That's true. I've heard that language also. I've seen the language in mainstream CNN interviews, MSNBC, Fox. I've read it in articles and different, yes, we've seen that language where that they're being talked about and treated. But I think we see that in what the deputy mayor said, that this attitude of, is it our fault? These people can't self-govern, I mean, again, even though she may not have called them subhuman, that is the
implication.
The takeaway, right? Is that they are less than us. It's not our fault that they can't do better. I do think that is something that their right-wing government, and I mean, and we see that play out here, right, with Trump, And our right-wing government, when they talk about people of color, when they talk about trans people, when they talk about immigrants, we just had Trump talking about immigrants are poisoning the blood of his country. So, we hear that rhetoric, and what that rhetoric is a call to genocide. That's what it is. It's a call to genocide, that these people are subhuman. So yeah, we hear that rhetoric there, we hear it here. It's not it's unfortunately not new, but yeah, so yeah, I would say that that's accurate also. I don't know, as a Jewish person, I've found this incredibly, incredibly difficult, because I know a lot of people who are really struggling with anti-Semitic attacks, people who are really afraid for their kids who are in college campuses and whatnot and being attacked. Kids who have no political involvement at all. They're just going to class. Shuls that have been threatened and have to have increased police presence. I know people who are really truly suffering and frightened. They're afraid to say they're Jewish. And I know they get upset when I don't take the automatic line of support for Israel, but I don't think that that is the Jewish thing to do. I think the Jewish thing to do is to support the people who are being bombed almost to the brink of non-existence, and a plight that has been invisible for 75 years. A group of people living under a constant oppression and constantly painted as terrorists, as backwards, as less than, and somehow not deserving of the same freedom that Jews wanted in the establishment of Israel. I don't lack sympathy. I understand Jews very much wanted a place where Jews would be safe to be Jewish all the time and not have to be a minority, because as a minority, Jews don't feel safe. There's a woman, I think her name is Roz. She is a Jewish activist. And one of the things she talked about is, I don't need that to be safe. I don't need a state of my own to be safe. And so I feel like she does, I guess. I understand that Jewish people just want a place to be Jewish where people can't tell them that you're not allowed to be. After World War II happened, nobody would take Jewish people in. They looked at countries all over the place. They looked at Uganda, they looked all over the world for places where they were going to put Jews because nobody wanted to take them in. So I understand everybody just wants to feel safe, but somehow Jewish trauma has become the trauma of a completely innocent group of people who had nothing to do with Jewish oppression. And as tragic as the Jewish Holocaust was and still is, this is also tragic too. And it is also a Holocaust. More children have died in this conflict than any other this century. It's been pretty indiscriminate bombing all over. They tell them to move from one area, move to the south. Then they bomb the south. There's no place for them to go that is safe. And once it's done, let's say
that's a message that Netanyahu's trying to send, that it's not safe no matter where you are in Israel.
I mean, and I certainly think he wants the Palestinians to know they're not very safe. I certainly think that that's the message he wants them to understand. And I think they're getting it loud and clear. because they're definitely not safe. You know, um, the reality is that if in order to be safe, we have to kill thousands of innocent people, is our safety really worth that? Why is our safety worth so much more than their safety? Don't we have to question just a little bit, just a little? Like, do we really need for thousands of innocent children to die in order to be safe? Has that ever been, does that ever seem like the right answer?
The survivors that you knew, what did they mean by never again?
Never for anybody anywhere.
Yep, I remember in
Anybody,
2003 reading
oh,
about a member of the Israeli Knesset who was a survivor, crying about the siege of Ramallah, literally crying, shedding tears on the Knesset floor, that this is what the Nazis did to us. It meant never for anyone, not just
yes,
never for Jews.
yes, very, very much so. Very, very much so. Never again does not mean never again just for Jewish people. That's not even in line with Jewish thinking. You know, it means never again for anybody. Nobody should be going through such a thing. It just boils down to this being wrong, and we need a ceasefire. We need a free Palestine. And I know that that scares a lot of people. There was a really interesting little snippet of a Palestinian woman talking, how when she was talking to a friend of hers who was Jewish, and they talked about the phrase from the river to the sea, right? That when they talked about that phrase, that in their head, what she saw was literally Palestinians chasing Jews into the ocean. Like, those were the images in her head that she had. And the woman who was Palestinian was appalled that this is what that they were thinking, that this was what it meant for them. When in reality, for them, what it meant was an end to a blockade and freedom. You know, but if you really want to break down the statement, right? Some say it's an argument for a two-state solution. From the river to the sea, what river? The Jordan River, which is where? That's the West Bank. To the sea,
Edge
the
of the,
Mediterranean Sea. From the West Bank to Gaza. Some could say some believe it's a call for a two-state solution.
do you support a two-state solution or a one-state solution?
Oh, honestly, I don't live there. I don't know that I'm the right one to have an opinion on that, because I'm not the one living under an oppressed state. Being very honest, I don't see another way outside of a two-state solution. I believe the West Bank and the land in between and all of Gaza. But I also believe that Jews, Muslims, Christians, everyone must have access to Jerusalem. I believe that vehemently. Everybody must have access to Jerusalem. I don't have a good solution to this.
I'm not sure there is a good
My
solution.
understanding, the majority of Palestinians, no, there is no good solution, because a good solution would be going back in history and rewriting how all of this happened in the first place, which we cannot do. You know, but can they do what South Africa does and all live together? I don't know, especially after this. You know, with everything that's happened and the blatant slaughter of even children, hospitals, babies, with absolutely no remorse at all. None. the coldness with which they talk about the crushing death. And I say crushing because I mean so literally. I mean tiny little bodies being crushed by bricks coming from above them. These are not fast, instant deaths. These are people reaching across brick to try to grab for their babies that are slowly being crushed to death. That's what you're talking about. Thousands of them. And there's no emotion connected to it. There's nothing. There's no remorse. There's no regret. There's these lines that they just keep repeating. Human shield, human shield, human shield. Let's break that down. Let's just go with it being true. So what? They thought they could shield themselves from bombs by holding up humans? Is that even logical to you? They're not shooting them. I mean, they are shooting them, but they're bombing them. You think they thought they could grab a human being and say, here we go, I'm going to shield myself from a 2,000-pound bomb.
Well, I think the idea behind there is we're going to make it into an atrocity that you did attack our military because civilians died instead. I don't think that is a good argument for going through with it anyways. Then means you got to go in tactically. They have like the Navy SEALs, how they went in after bin Laden. It was a surgical strike. They went, they dropped people on the ground. They went in, they killed only the people that needed to be killed. That is what Israel would have the impetus to do. And they have the funding to do it. They are fighting people who can barely construct any sort of weaponry whatsoever. You can go in on the ground with your elite fighting force.
Yep.
With all this American money funding it, you can afford to do that. They choose not to. It's a political choice. We would rather have them die.
Yes. Yeah. That's I guess my point is that even if you believe that that's their only goal is safety, then why do it this way?
Yeah, and it's definitely not safety because
and
you are
they talk about they want to free the Palestinian people from Hamas. Then why do it this way?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier.
I guess they'll be free from them if they're all dead.
You said, how could people do what Hamas did? It's images like this. People remembering, I had my child die like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sort of thing where you are going to get so enraged that you are willing to create such atrocities. And so you do not, it's not in your best interest to create that, especially when you're always complaining you're surrounded by these hostile nations. You want to send them all these Palestinians off to live in there and spread their stories where people are going to create this hatred of you. That's not a winning solution. That's not something that creates safety for Jews.
No, this is the opposite of creating safety for Jews. You are creating a whole generations of people who look at Jews as monsters. Like I see old cartoons coming back from World War II era where Jews are drawn in these monstrous forms. And gee, I wonder why. So no, all of this makes Jews less safe. But you mentioned something that I definitely wanted to touch upon before we go. And that is, a couple things. One, this is kind of out of nowhere, but I just want to point out when, in terms of why I have my position the way I do. If you have any doubts about the amount of death going on there right now, I know two different people, one who lost 70 family members, one who lost 60 family members. They woke up one day and every family member they've ever had is dead. Their mother, their father, their sister, their brother, their nieces, their nephews, their cousins, their aunts, babies, elderly, they're all dead. Imagine waking up tomorrow and everybody you love and everybody who loves you is gone. And there is no getting on a plane to go to a funeral. There's not even bodies, for the most part, to be buried, just pieces. Do you think that those people really want to be my friend as a Jew? Do you think they give a damn how I feel or care about anti-Semitism today?
It definitely doesn't push them in that direction.
It doesn't push them in that direction. It does not. You've created people. You're growing and you're growing seeds of hatred. You're planting them deep within the souls of people who will remember suffering and pain and death. The best thing any Jew can do right now to be safe is to get up and say that I'm Jewish. This has got nothing to do with my religion. Put this on the blame where the blame belongs, not on me, because I don't support this nonsense. We have to, much the same way many Christians need to reclaim our religion as not having anything to do with this or supporting this, because it does not. I would ask people to please listen to the many Jewish voices that have been protesting this war, that have been protesting the occupation of the West Bank long before this war happened, and the blockade in Gaza for many years. They may not be voices that are very loud. We may not be voices that have big lobbyists, but there are many of us.
And I'm hearing you say that Western Jews, if they want safety, they want to stand up for what is right because they don't want to be associated with the monstrous actions of Israel. That's what's in their best interest.
I would say that it's very obvious that Netanyahu makes us less and less safe every single day. Every single day that this war goes on, we are less and less safe. You know, every single day, this gets more and more and more hatred towards Jewish people.
Yep. You want to go on about your view on Biden and the U.S.'s position.
Yep. And I have always voted as a Democrat, not because I am a Democrat. I am to the left of the Democratic Party. But I vote as a Democrat because I don't like throwing away my vote. And because I like abortion rights, and I like
tactics.
I like I like abortion rights. I like gay marriage. I like laws to not be passed that mean trans people are going to be, executed in Times Square. And if you think that that's funny, take a look at the article that came out about Tim Wahlberg today, who told, I don't want to speak the wrong country, but he told another country to not allow themselves to be pressured from the international community. Yes. Okay. It was Uganda, but I couldn't quite remember. Don't be pressured. Go ahead and have the death penalty for homosexuals. It's not hyperbolic to say that these people want minorities to die, especially the LGBTQIA community, but they're not too fond of people of color either. And many of them are also serious Nazis, as in there's good people on both sides, if we would like to harken back. So I vote Democrat, and I'm very comfortable saying that is the right decision to make, because I don't want to empower people who are even more dangerous. That said, I guess for everybody, there comes a red line when the lesser evil just wears on you too much. And I cannot see myself voting for Biden. I cannot see myself voting for somebody who has funded this genocide unapologetically. I mean, at one point, it was right before Christmas, I think, he made a statement when Israel said they were going to flood the tunnels, the very tunnels where the hostages are. Or he said, Israel's dangerously close to losing support. And then a bunch of people in Congress had a fit about it, and he backtracked. He backtracked on that statement. I believe funding this is wrong. I have friends who I'm worried about their mental health because they have family and relatives there, and they view this as their money is funding their family's death. I'm genuinely worried about their mental health and where they're at right now. Their depression and things that make me feel like they're suicidal. And their anguish. I know that they do not support Biden. And in my support of them and in my belief that funding this war is wrong, I can't do it. I cannot vote for a Democrat this year. So I'm hoping that the Democrats get rid of Biden, that they're running some sort of shadow candidacy.
There's talk people want him to drop out because he cannot win. You said he has, what, 53% of the black vote at this point?
53% of the black vote at this point.
Yeah.
And the black community as a whole.
Highest black vote of all time or highest share for all time for Democrats. Now he's at the lowest.
At yes.
Since what? Wilson?
Mm-hmm. It's bad. It's bad. He's definitely lost the Arab vote. He's lost the Muslim vote. And people think those two things are synonymous. I'm going to give you anybody who might watch a quick education. They are not. The biggest group of Muslims in this country are not Arabs. They are, in fact, black people. But he's lost the Muslim vote. He's lost the black vote. He's lost the Arab vote. He's lost the youth vote. He's lost some of the Jewish vote, certainly the Jewish youth vote. At least the last time I looked at the numbers. I'm not really sure who his base is anymore.
White women who are upset about missing brunch.
It's like, it's a really small group. If he wins, it'll be because people are too afraid of Trump. And Trump may not run. It, to my surprise, is looking less and less likely. He's off the ballot in Maine. He's off the ballot in Colorado.
Doesn't mean he won't run. He's crazy. He will be the second candidate since Eugene Debs to run from prison.
He might. That'll be the one way he loses. I think he would lose to Biden if he ran from prison. I think if he ran from prison, he would lose to Biden. He would win Biden any other way. If he's not in prison, he's going to win. It does not matter. I guess that's, when people say to me, what about trans rights? What about abortion rights? You have children who can someday get pregnant. And I guess, I have two answers to that. One, when the lesser evil becomes only lesser because it might impact me, then we've gone into Love Me a Liberal territory. Check out the Phil Oakes song, folks.
Love Me a Liberal.
And I can't live with that. I can't live with that. But also, I don't really think it matters if I voted for him or if I didn't. He's not going to win. He's not going to win. He's not. So if there was ever a time for me to go ahead and vote my conscience, this is it, because my vote is not going to get it. The man is not going to win. Not
You
against
like Cornel West?
I do like Cornel West. I love the things that he said about this war. He said, "Don't you let anybody tell you that because you love Palestinian children means you hate Jewish children." And as a Black Jewish person, that was a very emotional moment, um, because that's the accusation that I get. And it's very much not true, you know?
And you've gotten that from other Jewish people.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of right wing Christians. Um, a lot of right wing Christians give me that too. That, you're anti Semitic. Even after I tell them I'm Jewish. Well, you're a self hating Jew. I am not a self hating Jew. I don't even
They
believe
will
this
go
has anything
around and
to
they'll burn down a synagogue tomorrow.
you know.
Christians.
I don't even believe this has anything to do with being Jewish. It's not Jewish people who are advocating or responsible for this. Um, I would say that Netanyahu is one of the least Jewish people on the planet. Um, he certainly does not seem particularly observant to me. Um, you know, um, but yes, I've gotten a lot of that, and he talks. Cornel West talks a lot about that. You can love Jewish people and Palestinian people at the same time, and I do. I love all the babies. I want all the babies to be happy and free and healthy and not being blown up. And if that makes me a bad person because I don't want babies to be blown up, then so be it. But yeah, so that's where my vote's going this year.
And me, I personally, as a trans person, I don't trust the Democrats to back us. They only started backing us when it became the public got behind us.
Yes.
And so it's electorally, it's electorally in their advantage to back us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen what they've done with, for example, the Black community. they're the ones that Black people are supposed to vote for, supporting Black interests. But when it comes down to it, do they ever actually back the Black people? You have Black Lives Matter calling for defunding the police. Joe Biden comes out and says, "Hey, we absolutely need to fund the police, not defund the police. We need more money for policing. That's our solution." It's really just taking the Black community for granted. What are they going to do? They give vote for someone else? Well, it looks like a huge chunk of them this coming election are going to go do something else.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to hurt them long term too, because you had so much activism in 2020 that got him that vote. Like
Yes.
Stacey Abrams in Georgia running on this progressive social justice platform saying, "Hey, you got to vote for Biden because he's going to deliver this. He's going to deliver this."
And
And
then
Biden went
all
out
over
of
it.
his way to not deliver any of it.
Mm-hmm.
How is he going to possibly win?
Well, that's the whole thing. That's why, the Black community in large there was a young Black man who was doing a rock out the vote, just by putting go vote stickers with names of people who are running on people's doors, right? He was not partisan. And they asked him, "Who are you voting for this election?" Assuming it's Trump versus Biden. And his response was, "I don't know, it's kind of a hard question."
It's not really Trump versus Biden. We have the power as the American people to elect whoever the fuck we want.
My point was that
but we have this mindset.
the options they presented him, right?
Yeah,
was that assuming that Trump gets the Republican ticket and Biden gets the Democratic ticket.
And we don't have to vote for Republicans or Democrats. They just have a huge advantage.
They have
so
a
many
massive advantage.
Structurally, societally, they have a huge advantage. It's saying that we could elect whoever we want. The problem is that none of us are, or very few of us are brave enough to stand out and say, "You know what? I'm not going to vote for the Democrats or Republicans. I want somebody who's going to actually represent me. I want to put some meaning to democracy."
I think people get tired of symbolic victories. You know, I have never been a fan of a symbolic victory. I have never been a fan of having something, putting my vote in just to say that I did it. Symbolic victories don't hold a lot of meaning or sway with me. My point in doing it this time is not for the symbolic victory, but because I'm not sure I can live with anything else. I have to vote with what I can live with.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be a symbolic victory. I think it could be a real victory, but it's a whole lot of work. It is a massive endeavor to do by all means, and it's going to take many elections for it to happen. I would love one thing that I think that people should be thinking about. It doesn't matter who you say you're going to vote for right now, as far as the election results. Speak your conscience now. If it comes down to it, and you get in the election booth, and who you really want has no chance of winning, then vote. Then that's when you say, okay, I'll give the Democrats my vote. But in the meantime, you need to start building something, communicating to other people, hey, this is where I think we should go, and see if they will buy in. If we all have that mindset, it's a lot easier to overthrow this. But if you're deciding now, no, I'm going to support the Democrats no matter what, and I'm going to go fight against anything better, you'll never get to that step. And so I think the biggest thing we have to do first off is say, until I get in the election booth, I'm not going to succumb to the lesser evil arguments. But you also, because I don't want to hold you hostage, I know you're busy. You stay as long as you want, but you wanted to also go into my hopes and future for future and my own children. So I want to make sure you get through what you needed to before you have to go.
Yeah, I guess that what I'm hoping for is what I've seen is that, you know, these arguments, these conflicts, these battles that really don't belong to our generation at all have just been continued down the generational line so that you have people taking sides in ways they don't even understand, even when it has no personal impact on them to take the side that they're taking. They don't even know anybody over there, or they have no concept of what life is like for either side at all. I guess I hope that my generation somehow does what previous generations could not do and does not pass off this hatred and feelings of in-group, out-group between our communities as Jews and Muslims and Jews and Arabs. I guess I hope that we can somehow, that's what I'm trying to teach my children, is to recognize that just because you're Jewish doesn't mean you have any right to that land. You don't have right to somebody else's homes. And literally that is what has happened. They've gone into their homes and said, you no longer live here, get out.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have the right to their homes. You do not have the right to their land. And you should have empathy for them, and you should care about their struggle. And they are the same as you. They are not different. They are just like you. And I hope that at least within this country, regardless to what side you're supposed to be on, I guess my hope is that people will teach their children, you know, as the expression goes, I promise to teach my babies to love your babies. And I guess that's what my hope is for the kids here in this country, is that they're taught to love and care about each other and stand with each other rather than against each other, rather than having some innate duty that because you are this, you must be against or for one thing or another. But that to think for yourself and investigate what is actually happening, and what do you really believe, and what is really right, and what is really wrong. Not what are you supposed to have blind allegiance to. So that would be my hope for my children's generation. And out of this conflict, my hope is that finally Israel has gone too far and people can see how Palestinians are existing. I won't use the word living, I will use the word existing. What is happening to them, and the callousness in which these things are carried out, beyond this war, but the blockade in general, that they are able to see that, when you think about the prisoner exchanges, right? We use the word prisoner for Palestinians and hostage for Israelis, but the majority of these so-called prisoners, many are children, and the majority have never been charged with an actual crime. And some of the crimes that they've been charged with are like throwing rocks and sticks, across the blockade.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been locked up for years for such things. Imagine locking up a 15-year-old child in this country for throwing a rock.
Actually, I can't imagine that in this country.
For years.
It's black.
And yeah. Sad to say, you're probably right. But where is it that they have thousands and thousands of these so-called prisoners to exchange for hostages? And the vast majority of them have never actually committed a chargeable crime. So I'm hoping that
from genocide,
the world can see, especially our country and our youth can see what is happening to these people, and through sheer public demand, push our foreign policy into a different direction.
I think the vast majority of Americans definitely want different direction here.
Yes.
Majority of both Democrats and Republicans want a ceasefire.
Yes.
We're paying for this.
Yes.
But none, like you got 8% of Democratic representatives are, let's have a ceasefire. Then literally nobody else across the political spectrum.
Yes. And I guess that's my hope for the future. I guess my hope for the future is that, is twofold. Internationally speaking, that finally there is some real attention from the global community at what is happening here, and that through this incredible tragedy, that new hope is born with peace, and Gaza is rebuilt and Palestinians are freed. That the international community steps up and applies just way too much pressure to allow this to just continue on as it has. It's not enough for them to stop bombing. That's not enough. We have to have real change in that region for those people. And real change looks like freedom. And I'm hoping that now, with all that has happened, that is, and there seems to be energy in there, in the international community and within this country, there seems to be energy for recognizing the rights of Palestinians as an independent people. There seems to be energy there. So I'm hoping that this tragedy lands there. And I'm hoping that the Democrats get a real good wake-up call. And what we end up with is possibly a third party. Is that being too hopeful? Looking at this situation, because it's like you said, you got 8% of Democrats willing to represent what 70% of Americans want.
Mm-hmm. It was the
Okay.
same thing with Medicare for All and other programs like that. Democrats not willing to give on it, even when not only majority of Democrats want it, but even the majority of Republicans are in favor of it.
So I'm hoping that this causes enough political chaos to create some real change, because I really am. I'm so tired of the lesser evil, and God knows I've preached it long enough, and I am so tired of people who are so stuck in 1982 that they cannot, they're planting seeds of hatred whose violence they will never have to live with. All right. Biden will be dead long before the major repercussions of some of his actions have taken place.
With the way he's degrading right now, there's a chance he may be dead by the time the election comes around.
He does not look well. He does. I've heard accusations of being confused.
So he's going to lie down in the middle of the press conference.
But I hope that that's my hope for the future, is that this lands in some change. Sometimes, it's like the expression is that, it's always darkest before the dawn. And I'm hoping that this is our darkest and dawn is coming.
Yeah. And I do think I want to point out, just because you have gotten some hate for standing up for what's right from American Jews, that you are in a position where you could hide your Jewishness very easily. You don't have to say you're Jewish. You can just say, no, I'm a black woman and that's it. And,
I mean, if I want people to know I'm Jewish, I have to tell them. Otherwise,
yeah.
Never.
And your Jewish identity means enough to you that you're going to say it anyways, that it actually does mean something to you. So I think that's something that they need to keep in mind. You very much, your Jewish identity does have this meaning to you, because otherwise you would have abandoned it by now and said, no, I'm not. So this is very much a heartfelt thing from your Jewish identity, what you're telling us here today.
So much of this is because of my Jewish identity. I mean, there's conflicts going on around the world right now. Palestinian people are not the only people being slaughtered or facing genocide or starvation. This is going on all around the world.
Latinos right in our own country here are pushing the concentration camps.
I mean, we have the crisis at our own border right now. This is personal to me as a Jewish person. As a Jewish person, I want to be a voice of accountability, that I want to reclaim my religion as peaceful, as one that wants peace and freedom for all people. And this notion that to be Jewish is to support this is faulty. They just have better marketing.
Welcome foreigners in your land because you were foreigners in Egypt.
It's this idea that being Jewish means you must support the Israeli government is so virulently anti-Semitic, and it's an excuse white supremacists use against Jews all the time. All right. It's a constant attack on Jewish identity, that we actually have loyalties to a different government and are not loyal to our own country, which is not true. That is not true. I have no ties to Israel. I have no ties to the Israeli government. I am a Jew. I am not Israeli. All right. Yeah, so yeah, it's very much central to my Jewish identity that peace and moving forward in a productive way, in a positive, caring, compassionate way for all people is part of my identity. Never again is something that is drilled into your head as a Jew from being very little. I don't, I never again. I started reading Holocaust books and hearing the stories and going to museums at a very young age. And never once in all of my history do I have any memory of never again meaning not for Jewish people. Ever. That was never what it was. Never again always meant never anybody. We do not just indiscriminately kill or oppress based on religion, based on gender, based on skin color, race, ethnicity, any of these qualifiers, any of these categories. It was always my religious upbringing when it came to stories of the Holocaust was always about how killing people, separating people, treating people as different because they pray differently than you or look differently than you is wrong. Period. From my grandmother, who was not an educated woman, um, to her son, my uncle, my mom, every family member I've ever had, every shul I have ever been to, every discussion group I have ever been part of.
And I think might help. A lot of people are probably not going to be familiar with what a shul is.
Oh, yeah, my apologies. It's another word for synagogue or temple, where Jewish people go to worship. Um,
Oh, yeah.
that inside these sacred halls, when solemn discussions are going on, um, it is never just about the right of Jewish people to live, but the right of all people to live free and unobstructed in their ways of worship and family and survival and flourishing.
Worldwide in group of people who have the right to live that should never happen to.
Yes, no, that should never happen to anybody. Nobody's supposed to live under a blockade. Nobody's supposed to have their water turned off. Nobody's supposed to go to bed at night and wonder if the bombs are going to go off around them. These things are not supposed to happen. None of these things are right, and it's not right because they're Palestinian or they're Muslim. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it okay.
Mhm.
And as a Jewish person, it has been incredibly difficult to see my religion used as an excuse and the safety of my children used as an excuse for killing Palestinian children.
Yeah, and it definitely brings me to something that I realized about a decade ago. That Israel is the ultimate proof that nationalism is wrong no matter what. Doesn't matter how oppressed the group is, it's going to end badly when you have a sustained nationalism. Because even though, I mean, no, I don't think there's a group other than maybe the Roma who would be from the same event who suffered as much as the Jewish people did during World War II. That was, I mean, it was the largest percentage of a group other than the Roma that were removed from, from existence
6 million
being in
Jews.
Israel. So, I mean, leftists all across, we love Jewish nationalism at that moment because, who deserves it more than the Jewish people at that moment? But you see what it turned into. And this is what happens naturally when you have this nationalism of any sort and you have the power in society. It gets turned against everybody else. And so that's something that becomes problematic one way or another. I mean, it's bad when you have white nationalism. Jewish nationalism turned out just as bad. It Black nationalism turned out bad in Zimbabwe specifically. Um, and if it really had that power base elsewhere, you're going to see it because we're all ultimately the same. We're all going to do those bad things if we're thinking about it from that stage, that thought of nationalism. And so
I
one
don't I don't think it's that we're all going to do that. I think it's that within all human nature, you have people who are aggressive and power hungry. And those are the ones
who drive it.
rise to these positions, unfortunately. And for whatever reason, as human beings, we have not figured out a way to ensure that the people who are in power are not the ones who think that way.
The best here is to shed any sort of nationalism and to start looking at everybody around you as part of us. I mean, we could do it like you have 2 dogs. We all heard them barking like crazy. Are they not part of your in group? Do you not love those 2 dogs?
Oh, they are very much part of our in group.
And they're not even human.
And they're not even human.
So why can't we do that with other humans? Why can't we look across and say, hey, this black person, this white person, this Jewish person, this Arab person, this Asian person, we're all us. We may have differences, but we primarily think of ourselves as humanity. And that's our in group. If we do that, I think you really weaken those people, those power hungry people. They don't have that tool to use against us.
Yes, they don't have the ability to divide and rule. You're preaching to the choir because we are all the same. And I do believe that it is this idea that somehow we are different from each other that isolates us and allows us to have a lack of empathy, I guess, for each other. I mean, I had one conversation, and I guess that a lot of people are very angry with my viewpoints, and I understand that, and that's not new for me. I mean, people are angry with my viewpoints anyway, but I had a conversation, and I will not use names, despite the fact that honestly, my impulse is to let the entire world know the things that this person said to me. But she was somebody I considered a friend. She is a real leftist, in every other capacity. Not a moderate, very hardcore, individual rights, very much active in the world, in this country, on civil rights, and on top of it all, yes, Jewish, but also very much against religion being part of government in any way ever, even if it was something that would be beneficial to this person as a Jewish person. I don't want to go too much into the specifics of the situations because it would be too revealing. Mm-hmm. Right? But even in situations where the argument is advantageous for her being Jewish, if it meant making religion more a part of government, she was against it. Vehemently, unapologetically. And when she talked about this war, the things she said, it was like talking to a concentration camp guard. There's a moment in the movie Nuremberg where they're interviewing a Nazi guard, or he's testifying, and they asked him, and you didn't feel guilty for any of this. And he said, does an exterminator feel guilty for killing the rats? With a smile on his face. And that's what she reminded me of.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's all taken from actual transcripts from the Nuremberg trials.
You know, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like I was talking to somebody with that. I mean, to the extent that this person said that they would not even make consideration for the hostages, that they would not consider their lives in bombing.
Yeah,
so if it's not life you're looking to preserve, what is it? So I told her, I said, then you don't care about Jewish life either. You don't care about lives. You care about land and power. That's what you care about. You care about land and power, and your obsessive desire to ensure there is power over this land would lead you to make decisions that would kill not only innocent Palestinian children, but by your own innocent Jewish children. And you don't care at all. There was no emotional attachment to it at all. Nothing. There was no emotional attachment. No amount of dead Palestinian children had any impact on her.
And how could people are always asking, how could the Holocaust have happened? It's through stuff like this. It happens gradually, and it comes from outgrouping.
I have talked to some pretty nasty people in my time. Okay, I've talked to people who really do lack any empathy at all. I worked in a psychiatric hospital. I've talked
Moms for Liberty pioneer all their crap in your school district. You're at those meetings.
You know, I talk to hardcore transfer. I talk to people like all the time. Nothing has ever chilled me so much than the way this woman spoke about Palestinian children. I've never been more chilled, or like I couldn't sleep. I felt sick. I cried, and I realized that, and I told her, and she stopped talking to me over it. It's like talking to a concentration camp guard. That's what it feels like.
An average person
and who
otherwise is good got turned into that.
I say that as a Jewish person. That's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of every Holocaust book I ever read. Half of her rhetoric could have came from one of those books. Half of her rhetoric could have came from one of those books, and it was chilling. So I guess I say that to say that why does this matter to me? Why is this? Because I don't ever want to be complacent or oblivious to my duty as a Jewish person to speak up. We talk about people not being bystanders and just sitting on the side when it doesn't impact them. Everybody loves to trot out that poem that when it came time to speak up for me, there was nobody left. First, they came for the trade unionists. This is me speaking up. This is me not being complicit, not turning the other cheek because I'm not directly impacted by living there. This is my moment of making sure that every time I have ever, and I know we like to use the term called in, but that's cute. I will call you out. I'm not calling you in, I'm calling you out. And this is me ensuring that I don't need to be called out for not putting my money where my mouth is. This is wrong. This is going to have repercussions that are going to be generations to come. We can only hope that this lands in a place of peace and freedom so healing can take place. Because if it doesn't, if we cannot find a good resolution here, if we cannot find a way to give freedom to these people and rebuild to the extent that it's possible, the repercussions to our country and to Jews around the world is going to last for generations.
Yep. And I think all Americans, if we're not doing our part in calling it out, blood's on our hands too, because we have so much involvement in that whole situation, more than we should from this far away.
So I have a strange phone call coming in that I must take. And with that,
yep, you're always welcome back. Anything with what's going on with the education, I'm sure I'm always an outlet for you. Thanks for being on.
thanks.
All right, I am back. I am alone. And yeah, a lot of this I want to point out the big issue of how we define our group. Because I think this is central to how this all works. It doesn't work when you are separated and we're fighting amongst ourselves. There's essentially one identity that you're going to hold in above anything else. It could be humanity, it could be the working class, it could be a nationality, it could be a religious group, but everything beyond that is weakening what you're working for. If you are working for socialism, you want to have that working class first. If you want to, if you're fighting for Black nationalism, you want that Black identity first. And you don't want to separate within it. So, if you're a Black nationalist, you're not separating between Black members of the bourgeoisie and Black members of the proletariat. You have to keep that together to keep yourself strong in that. And I don't think that's the correct way to go at things, because we are the humanity aspect is the biggest aspect for us right now. I mean, eventually we could come across other civilizations from other stars. It might be a matter of sentient beings, being that large group or something like that. But we want to at least have as large as humanity as a whole. Part of that right now is uprooting the bourgeoisie, in my opinion. So I fall back there. But there's so many issues that come up. We see what's happening in Israel and Palestine, where these atrocities are happening. It is horrid, and it is a result of that national focus on this nation group. And it really is part of racist European 19th century ideology. The original Zionists actually argued that they didn't belong in Europe because they were weakening the national character of all these countries they were in, and they needed their own place where they could all go, where it's only for Jews, because otherwise their national identity would be weakened. And it is so not how the real world works, but that is the mindset that got us to the atrocities we're seeing today. We really need to focus more on working for the common goals of humanity. And if you look at, I took a class recently, race, class, and politics, taught by Dr. Brown over at Wayne State University. There was a lot of articles about how unionization efforts failed in the South. And the big reason why it failed in the South was due to racism. The racist white workers didn't want to include the black workers in their union. So, of course, as a result, the black workers ended up being one of the first members to scab. It's actually the high skilled workers that scabbed first, but black workers were right after them going there. Whereas you go look up further north, where you had a inclusive union, it was not racialized, that union over in Cincinnati, I think it was. The workers there, they got what they needed. They did successfully unionize. They did successfully force concessions from the steel industry because they all worked together. They weren't at cross purposes. And whenever you are making somebody your outgroup, you are also encouraging them to make you part of their outgroup. They are not going to do work in solidarity with you if you're not working. That's part of the big reason intersectionalism is so important to any movement, is that if you are not caring about the concerns of other members of the group, you're not really having them part of your in-group, and you can't work together effectively to work towards a common interest. So that means, yeah, you have to call out racism. You have to call out transphobia. You got to call out homophobia. You got to call out sexism. These are all things that you have to do to make sure that you are one group. You're not you're not all divided against each other when you go move on the big class movement that is bigger than these other things. That doesn't mean we get to ignore these other issues. We don't. If you're going to exclude trans people, you are weakening the whole movement. If you're excluding Jewish people, you're weakening the movement. Not only by removing those people, but removing people who consider them part of their in-group, who don't want anything to do with a movement that excludes their friends, their family, whatever that in-group connection happens to be. So that is one big takeaway that I want to go from there. I also want to stress with the issues of when I was saying I don't trust the Democrats to follow up. This is something that's very important to me. That in order for me to serve somebody part of my in-group, I have to honestly care about not only working towards what's good for them, but understanding their struggle. And I expect people who consider themselves my ally to understand my struggle. I had somebody before who, by all means friendly, 100%, but said that they trusted my position on a trans issue because I'm transgender. So that means I'm right. And what that told me, now, first off, we're not a monolith, and I disagree with a whole bunch of trans people on a whole bunch of trans issues all the time. There's other people that you'll see on social media who constantly disagree with other trans people about how, on trans issues. We're not a monolith. There are no monoliths out there. But the bigger issue is that told me that they did not want to put in the effort to understand my situation. They didn't agree with me because they thought I was right. They agreed with me because it was expedient to them at that moment. I don't trust that if things change, if they didn't see the benefit in having trans people's backs for their own image, that they wouldn't just flip on a dime and all of a sudden I'm wrong because I'm trans, rather than I'm right because I'm trans. So I do that, and I piss off a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of exploited groups, because I dig deep into trying to understand the right and wrong of their own struggles. Because I feel obligated, because if they are going to be part of my in-group, I have to understand their situation. And that can mean disagreeing with certain aspects of it. It also means that you could trust that when I come out in favor of you, that is genuine, that I honestly believe that it's not a matter of political expediency, because I'm willing to piss off people by disagreeing with them on those things when it is so easy for me to just say, oh, yeah, I agree. Oh, you're Black, you're American Indian. You say that's the way it is, that's the way it is. No, I'm going to grapple with it, try to get the deeper understanding, get to the truth of the matter. And I think we all need to be doing that. We all owe that labor to one another to understand this. And it is a huge problem when people say, it's not my job to educate you on that issue. And a lot of people point out, yeah, you say that, then there's a whole bunch of right-wing sources who they're willing to go jump and educate people, and they're going to miseducate them to hell on it. And that is one part of the issue. But there is also a huge part of the issue that when we are doing that, I'm going to take a drink of water before we go on. That when we move on and oh crap, now I lost my train of thought. What the first part of the issue is that they don't do. The other part of it is the whole point of the privileged status in the discussion that you have from being part of the marginalized group is that you are able to educate others on that, insofar as that you have unique access to understanding. There are things that even if I'm seeing and I'm not part of that group, you're noticing because you're part of that group and you're able to point it out. It doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily agree with everything you say, but I'm going to pay specific attention. What are you noticing? Is this happening? Why might I have not noticed it? And there's plenty of things where I have learned from other oppressed groups about things that I didn't realize at first, and that's because I listen. But that's where the listening part goes. Tell me about what's going on from your perspective. Let's see how that plays out against other things, and we get to that common truth. The actual end result isn't just simply what the oppressed group thinks the solution is, because they have bias. People who are not in it have bias. You have to measure it all out to come to something that comes to truth. And it may be in the middle, it may be outside of the middle. I have definitely come into discussions, in particular with Black people, where I came up with a more extreme position on an issue than them, just from my understanding of other forms of oppression. So it doesn't necessarily have to go there, but I am obligated to try to understand it and grapple with it and try to reach that truth. And so are they when dealing with my struggles. They may not agree with what I have to say. They may be more extreme in their stance about trans rights than me. They may be less extreme, but they have to actually grapple with it if they're going to be part of the in group. And that's what we really need to focus on doing. It's not easy. It does take a lot of mental effort. And when we're doing that, it's important that if you are part of a marginalized group, that you are doing the good faith effort to properly educate on the issue. Whenever it comes up, it can be frustrating. It's good when you can point to a specific source that has everything already laid out, organized, rather than going about it necessarily every little aspect in person, especially if this is somebody that you're casually coming into contact with, as opposed to somebody who is, deep in, deeply involved in your life. For example, when it comes to Tiffany, I'm going to her home tomorrow to celebrate New Year's Eve. I was at her home for Christmas, which, oddly enough, she is very, very big on Christmas, despite being Jewish. She also celebrates Hanukkah to all hell. She, we have a very connected thing. She's going to go a lot more in detail with me in trying to educate me on a particular issue if she thinks that I need that education. She's not going to be that willing if it's somebody that she just runs into in a supermarket. but being willing to point people in the right direction to keep them from going to these bad sites, and to it's the only way that you're going to create the understanding that's going to improve your lot. And so we, even if it's not fair that we have that work to do when we are oppressed, we have to do the work if we want positive results. If we don't do the work, we're going to get the negative results. We are in part to blame for our own oppression if we're not willing to do the work to liberate ourselves. And that starts with educating about our own experiences, our own feelings about how things happen. And we may be right, we may be wrong. We're probably right more often than we're wrong. And I think that anybody approaching good faith is going to understand that. And they're going to take it earnestly when we describe things, and they have to grapple with it. Don't trust people who just say that you're right because of your oppressed identity. They are not truly allies. They are just phoning it in. They don't really care. They may do something, but it's for their own benefit, not because they care about you. So it is important to question. You just have to make sure that when you're questioning anything, that you're doing it in a respectful manner, where you're not just belittling people for an idea that you don't connect with yet, and you may not connect with in the end. And it has to be that two-way negotiation, not really negotiation, but two-way conversation to understand the minds where each person's coming from, and you are able to create a common consensus eventually in most cases, as long as both people are approaching it with intent. And that is part of what's ingrained in the human nature, the way the human mind works. We do not think for ourselves. We are able to do individual thoughts, but we really rely upon the input of others in shaping our ideas, in keeping with it. And that means we need to communicate this with people from all backgrounds in order to fully understand the picture. The world is much too complicated for any one person to understand on their own. It has to be a group effort. And so we evolved to work that way. That's the way the human mind works. That's going to play a big part in my master's paper, because I'm in both master's and PhD program at the same time. This coming semester, I get finally finish the master's part and only have PhD stuff ahead of me. But that master's paper is dealing on operational irrationalism that we're seeing in America. It's going to dig deep into how the human mind works. And I'm excited to be able to finish that. I did present a paper starting it in Chicago this past April. But I am going to be going further in it. And I think we have covered the issue here. So I'm going to end this for now. Thanks for joining. Feel free to look through the other videos. Hopefully you pick up a few subscribers. Hopefully you have a few viewers. I do not see any chats in Restream here, but I will look and see if I see any on YouTube. I'm not sure if I can see any on Twitch. I'm really unfamiliar with Twitch. But feel free to contact me and let me know if anything, any advice on getting this working properly. I don't want to ignore anyone when we're going through this. And I am still learning, still trying to get hold of an audience and get a hang of creating this content. Thanks for joining.